Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Impact of Artificial Intelligence in Managing Today's Total Workforce, hosted and sponsored by ZeroChaos and presented by Ardent Partners. If you have difficulties during this event, feel free to call the WebEx technical support at 1-866-779-3239. We are incredibly excited to not only discuss some current trends in the evolving world of work, but also highlight the impact of artificial intelligence and how businesses can better manage their talent today and tomorrow. Today's webcast will run for 60 minutes, and we encourage your questions, which we will address at the end of the event. In order to ask an online question, you may use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Please keep the Send to Default as all panelists. I'd like to now turn things over to Ardent's Vice President of Research and expert on the future of work, Christopher J. Dwyer. Chris, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon or good morning or good evening to all of you out there today. Thank you so much for taking the time to spend some time with us today on this wonderful webcast. Very excited about it. Before we dive into the content and share some brand new research findings, I want to take a moment and thank today's host and sponsor, ZeroChaos. With over $3 billion in managed spend and a global presence around the world, ZeroChaos is a leading provider of integrated workforce management solutions. ZeroChaos, a Carlyle Group company, offers a range of services and technology to help its customers better manage its total workforce, including MSP services, VMS technology, SOW, payroll, RPO, and independent contractor management. And today, we'll be joined by ZeroChaos CEO Jim Burke, who will not only talk about his own expertise in the artificial intelligence arena, but will also discuss how ZeroChaos is actively leveraging AI to help its customers today. Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Very, very excited to have you, Jim. Very quick bio on me. I've been an industry analyst for a very long time now. There's a good chance if you're on the line today, you've read some piece of research that I've written over the past 13 years. I spent 7 years with a company called the Aberdeen Group, and then moved on about 5.5 years ago to lead Ardent Partners research on contingent workforce management and the future of work. So in short, doing this a very long time and very excited to talk about some brand new research that I've conducted. So for those of you that are a fan of podcasts and utilize podcasts when you're working out, you're going for a run or a jog, or maybe on your daily commute to the office, or maybe when you're relaxing at night with a nice glass of wine, I encourage you to subscribe to Contingent Workforce Weekly. It's a podcast hosted by Ardent Partners and featuring me as its host. We are the contingent workforce and non-employee workforce industry's only dedicated podcast for the contingent workforce. And if you visit tiny.cc/CWWpod, you'll have a chance not only to listen to this week's edition, but you can also subscribe on any of your favorite podcast platforms. So before we dive into the big topic at hand, which of course is artificial intelligence in today's total talent pool, I want to talk about the state of talent today. And some of these research findings are brand new. They have not been published anywhere before. Every year I write a research study called State of Contingent Workforce Management. I've been writing it in some iteration for going on 13, 14 years now. And what I wanted to do is sort of set the stage a little bit, because if we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence, we're going to be talking about innovation in this wonderfully evolving world of work, I thought it'd be very critical to sort of set the stage and talk about what's happening in the world of work, the state of talent, and also identify some key trends. So with that said, I want to talk about the big picture here. And I'm going to apologize in advance for my voice. Obviously, I'm struck with some type of great New England cold here, so thank you so much for bearing with me. You can imagine what it was like a couple days ago trying to get through a podcast with a voice that was about twice as worse it is today. But a lot better today, and thank you again for bearing with me. So the big picture here. I'd say about 10 years ago, 17 to 18% of the average company's workforce was considered non-employee. And even back then, that was considered a pretty big amount. And what we saw in the face of the economic downturn and sort of what I call the perfect storm of what happened to allow the utilization of the non-employee workforce to grow and expand and essentially explode over the past 10 years was the idea that organizations found a in their non-employee workforce. And, excuse me, and when it came to the non-employee workforce, unlike in decades past, organizations really understood that they were using top-tier, high-quality talent instead of the very low-level tactical side of the contingent labor that they were used to using for so many years. And on top of that, in the past few years, you've had the explosion of the gig economy. You've had so many more very, very talented individuals deciding to take a more freelance and independent route and utilize their skill sets in a more virtual manner or in a more freelance manner. And so today, 41.5%, excuse me, of the average company's workforce is considered non-employee, in which in a few years we could be getting closer and closer to hitting that point in time where half of our workforce is considered non-employee. So very exciting times in the space. And so it wouldn't just be this explosion of non-employee talent growth if it wasn't for the fact that so many organizations truly understand how crucial this type of talent is. And so 98% of businesses perceive non-employee talent as critical to their overall enterprise operations. And that may seem like a gimme, 98%, but it's true. It really, at the end of the day, so many organizations understand the real impact of their non-employee workforce. Again, we're not talking about tactical day-to-day roles. We're talking about very critical, mission-crucial projects that are being led, managed, and supported by non-employee talent in some way. And then really just throwing a complete curveball into the traditional spectrum of contingent workforce management, excuse me, is the idea that nearly 74% of businesses lead with a talent-first approach when it comes to how work is done. And what does that mean? It means that the more traditional aspects of contingent workforce management, like leading with budget, leading with cost, leading with compliance, all very important aspects, pale a little bit when it comes to the very tier, excuse me, when it comes to the actual quality of the talent that they're utilizing. So, over the years, one of the things that I've been tracking is, if we're running a contingent workforce program, again, excuse me, apologies for my voice here. If we're running a contingent workforce program, we're typically dealing with a variety of challenges. Whether it's the pressure to reduce costs, the pressure to improve compliance, the pressure to improve visibility. Now, over the years, with so many different procurement teams leading contingent labor, and now obviously we're starting to see a shift there as well, where you have more and more other internal stakeholders starting to become involved in the day-to-day management of contingent labor. What we're seeing is a whole different group of challenges. And above all else, the desire to become a more agile business is what's coming out on top as the top pressure for today's businesses. Now, what does that mean? At the end of the day, what is the most important aspect for organizations is the idea that they can respond in real time to dynamic business challenges. Any new need that arises, any new competitive pressure, global marketplace pressure or issue, they want to be able to react to that problem in real time. And that trickles down to the idea of talent. And we're going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about what it means for organizations when it comes to the agile workforce, which in fact is actually the tagline for my new research study. So you're seeing some other issues here as well. Scarcity in finding permanent talent. Again, it's sort of the double-edged sword there. When you have more and more very talented professionals just choosing to take a whole new path when it comes to their work style and lifestyle, obviously it's going to be harder to fill different types of roles. And at the end of the day, too, I think one critical thing that we cannot forget is that at the end of the day, more and more businesses are starting to get focused on building better business outcomes. And I know that, again, this seems like a very generic thing to say, but the truth of the matter is not enough organizations are looking at the end goal. They're not looking at what is the outcome here? What do we want to happen? Because at the end of the day, you can't answer a question of how do we improve our product, how do we improve our service, how do we leverage our workforce to get work done in a more efficient and a more high-quality way, and trying to lead with things like cost or budget. It doesn't work that way. We need to lead with quality and talent. So another interesting set of findings here. When we think of work, we think of what happens on a day-to-day basis. We think of projects, we think of manufacturing, we think of product development, we think of our service architecture, we think of administration, we think of our internal stakeholders and the different groups they lead. So what is actually changing the way work gets done in general across the business spectrum? And we're seeing here that overarching pressure to adapt to changing market and economic conditions. Really, at the end of the day, organizations are really a product of their environment. We know what's happening on the outside. Within my business, there are certain things that I can control. There are certain things that my executive team can control. There are a lot of things that my functional stakeholders and business leaders can control. But at the end of the day, what the market does and what the economy does essentially dictates what we do as a business. And so we're starting to finally see the idea of all of the wonderful things happening outside of the business, and I'm talking things like innovation and technology and really just the increasing globalization of business, changing how work is done. We're understanding that when we're trying to answer that great question of how does work get done, we have globalization in mind. We have innovation in mind. We have technology in mind. We have the economy in mind. And other aspects as well. I mean, years ago, if we asked this question, it would all revolve around cost or budget. And it's exciting to see that more and more organizations want to diversify their talent pool. They want to diversify their workforce. I'll go on record here, and I've done it on my podcast, and I've done it at, maybe a dozen different conferences over the past few years. A diverse talent pool is the best talent pool, and it's exciting to see so many more organizations buy into that idea. So with that said, I want to talk, and if you listen to my podcast, this was actually the theme to this week's podcast, the most critical elements of work ranked. And so I love having the ability to talk about talent. Obviously, it's why we're here today, and we're going to get even deeper into a couple of these specific aspects when we start to talk about artificial intelligence and talent. But it's critical to be able to speak to the world of work and what's changing it, like we did on the previous slide, and actually having something to back it up. And so in my latest research study, I asked organizations pretty much point blank, here are 10, 11 different aspects of work. Everything you see here, from visibility to talent to engagement to cost to skills. And I want you to rank them 1 to 5. And so this is just yet another reinforcement that at the end of the day, there are two real things driving the future of work: talent and technology. And I've been, obviously, I call myself a future of work evangelist for a reason. I think that the future of work runs on 3 things. It runs on talent, it runs on innovation, and it runs on the convergence of the two. And we see here that straight from your peers in procurement, in HR, your directors of talent acquisition, your CFOs, your directors of IT, your CIOs, your COOs, a lot of executive survey responses in this research study indicate that above all else, innovation and talent come out on top as the most critical elements of work. And that's not to say some of the other aspects aren't important. I mean, you see something like diversity ranked so low here, but on the previous slide, you saw that it is changing how work is done. Again, these are all important. We're not trying to forget them or trying to make them fade away. Cost and budget is what? The sixth item down here. Doesn't mean it's not important. It just means that we are living in a new world of work. And so I think it's critical here if we're going to start talking about total talent and not just the contingent workforce, that we sort of shift how we're talking about our non-employee workforce. And so in the past, you see here there's sort of two separate notions here. Back in the day, you had cost savings really as the most important measure of success when it came to contingent labor and how contingent workforce management programs were measured. Cost savings have long been the number one performance metric or benchmark that the procurement team was measured on. And it's honestly, it's still happening today. I mean, I can ask all of you, I'm sure there are hundreds of procurement execs in the virtual audience today. If I said, hey, raise your hand if cost savings is the number one thing that you're measured on, and of course, I imagine the vast majority of you would do that. But the problem with it here is that this is a very archaic way of looking at it. And you see more structural supply management in the past as the top strategies for managing contingent labor and non-employee labor. And at the end of the day, historically, contingent workforce management programs were just telling their business units how to spend their dollars. They weren't doing anything really strategic with that talent that today has become so critical in addressing the way work is done. And so where's the shift? Where is it happening? You know, you see the light bulb here. It's all going to go off. Talent-led instead of commodity-led. Supplier performance management, supplier relationship management, and just overall supplier optimization. All of those aspects, they're still important today. If you are a veteran contingent workforce management program leader and you're looking at a program that has maybe $15, $20 million in managed spend under your program, all of those aspects are still important. I mean, you're never going to get away from supplier optimization or supplier performance management or measurement. That's what helps you do what you do best in contingent workforce management. But the fact of the matter is that we're dealing with a different non-employee workforce now than we did 5 or 10 years ago. We're dealing with a workforce that is just as critical as the everyday FTE. And so with that, of course, the idea that talent and labor are dynamic facets of how work is done. I mean, it really doesn't get any more clear than that. When we think about how work is done, what are the two answers to that question? Talent and technology, or talent and innovation. And of course, like I said, the future of work really revolves around the convergence of the two. And so shifting the mindset of traditional contingent workforce management to the sort of next or new generation means that we have to promote functional creativity. We can't stifle that. And so that's why we're leading with talent. And the reason why we are in a webcast or an event today that's so focused on contingent workforce management, we're not leading with cost savings as a point of discussion. We're leading with talent, and we're going to get even further into the other piece of that, which is innovation. So you see that phrase in the title, total talent, and here's the thing. Our workforce is becoming more and more blended. 41.5%, excuse me, of our workforce today is considered non-employee. And when you factor in the depth and the reach and the impact of your workforce, you can't just account strategically for your traditional employees or your FTEs. The idea here is that contingent workers today, or non-employee workers, whatever is your preferred term, you could use both, I always do, those types of workers aren't just stopgap solutions. They're not just, hey, here's a 2-week fill and plug in a role here. Now, does that mean that 100% of our contingent workforce is incredibly strategic at the end of the day? No. If you're spending $10 million a year on contingent labor, professional services, Is every dollar of that spend completely strategic? No. What this means at the end of the day is that you're looking at the totality of your contingent workforce in a much different way. The idea is that there are mission-critical projects happening at your organization. You have professional services supporting some very key initiatives across the enterprise. You're using talent in a way you've never done before. And it's essentially, again, I use the word convergence a lot. It's a hot-button word that I like to use. You have the convergence between your traditional and your non-traditional workforces. And when that comes together, it doesn't mean that you just throw everything out and you try to figure out a brand new way of managing everything. It means that you have to transform. You have to figure out a way to manage total talent. And this is something that I call the total workforce management operating model. It's something that I designed about 18 months ago, and I think it's still very highly relevant today. So when we look at the idea of total workforce management, which, again, if you want to define total workforce management, you may have a completely different definition than me, but the way that I look at it is the way that we as an organization are strategically managing both sides of our talent in a centralized, strategic, effective manner. And that takes into account the systems we're using, the data we're using, and the networks we're using. And so what we have here in this total workforce management operating model, and this is why I think it's important to get this out of the way before you move on to some of the bigger things here in the webinar, AI, of course, the topic du jour, is the idea that if organizations want to take that big leap and start building a workforce management program that takes totality into account, then there's certain things that I think are prerequisites. There has to be integration of workforce management technology. Can your provider provide RPO or integrate to RPO? Does your VMS platform integrate or be able to share data with your human capital HR systems? Functionally, can procurement and HR collaborate? Can they converge together? The great thing about total workforce management is that it allows procurement and HR or human capital management to shine. It allows them to do what they do best for the greater good of the enterprise's talent. And then on top of that, you have talent data and intelligence. I talk about agility a lot. I talk about the idea that we want to be dynamic in how we respond to challenges out there in the globalized marketplace, in the economy, in the business world. Wouldn't it be great if you had the foresight and the knowledge to have on-demand decision-making? So again, I talk about what's the number one answer to how does work get done. If you say talent, you're right. You say technology, you're right. You say convergence of the two, you're still right. Now, imagine you have the ability to have a real-time view of all of your talent-based resources across the entire organization. Your total talent pool from the perspective of here's all my professional services, here are all my FTEs, here are my independent contractors and freelancers, here are my contingent workers. I know which ones have which types of skill sets, and I have the ability in an on-demand way to utilize that intelligence to make real-time decisions. We talked about better business outcomes as being a better goal for us to have today as business leaders. So why can't we have the information behind that, to be able to build towards those better business outcomes? And we're going to find out that artificial intelligence is a fantastic way of gaining that. And then finally, total talent acquisition. I mean, here's the thing. A lot of organizations get confused. They hear total talent management or total workforce management, and they hear total talent acquisition. Here's where they differ. Total talent acquisition is a strategy. Total workforce management is a program. Total talent acquisition means that we have the ability as a business to centrally source and engage talent based on project requirements, skill sets, and expertise needed. It means that we, not necessarily centralizing onboarding and offboarding, but we have consistent and standardized measures. We know how to onboard an FTE. We know how to onboard a service. We know how to onboard a contingent worker. We know how to onboard a freelancer independent contractor while being compliant. And the offboarding, same idea. All of these aspects together form the idea of total workforce management. And again, this is a topic, of course, I always say topic for another day. It's a favorite phrase of mine. We could talk about this all day, but I think it is a good idea to get this out of the way, because when we are talking about the idea of total talent, it's great to have some of these thematic elements in our heads. So, one of the big findings from the State of Contingent Workforce Management Research Study, which not out in the market yet, but will be pretty soon, is the idea that all contingent workforce management programs have priorities. And I was very interested to hear about what those top priorities were. And we see here there was like 10, but here are the top 3: technology and innovation investments, SOW and services, and visibility and intelligence. In years past, I think innovation and technology was always probably a top 5 or 6 priority. I think last year it was number 4. But I think what's interesting about this slide right here, and we can get into the SOW services side another time, because again, what's wonderful about this space is that there are so many sort of meta topics within contingent workforce management that we could, of course, go down a proverbial rabbit hole. But you see here, technology, innovation, and visibility intelligence, together, you sort of lump those into one priority, proves that I believe that organizations, they're ready to make that leap. They're ready to make that next great journey into the technology that's going to help them bridge what's happening now to the future of work. And so before Jim and I talk about some of the aspects here about AI and talent in the world of work, I want to just throw out some brand new research findings before we do that. And so again, keep talking about a State of Contingent Workforce Management Research Study, which of course is going to be available very soon. We looked at the current utilization of artificial intelligence. And you see here, only 4% of organizations today have heavy utilization. And what do we mean by heavy utilization? I mean relied upon, like in use every day. 18% moderate utilization. So if we were even to bundle that together, that's 22%. That's less than a quarter of all organizations today are essentially regularly using AI in some way. And of course, that can take many forms. Is it natural language processing? Is it machine learning that's backing up their analytics? Are they using chatbots to talk to potential candidates? Or are they using chatbots in an internal intranet to help internal employees and FTEs get answers they need? It could be any of those things. But again, for all of the talk out there about artificial intelligence and its impact, one thing that we have to keep in mind is that the adoption is still low today. And the adoption is still low today, I believe, for one reason, because I don't think enough organizations truly understand where it's going to go, what impact it'll have. And I'm sure that Jim and I's conversation in a few minutes is going to help you with that, or help anyone that has that fear factor in mind. And two, of course, I bring up the fear factor. I think a lot of organizations, they think artificial intelligence, they think of the doomsday scenario. They think of, remember the Terminator movies with Skynet? Seems funny, but a lot of organizations think, well, artificial intelligence is not good for humans. And that couldn't be further from the truth. But, sort of a glimmer of hope here is that you see 33% of organizations here expect to use AI within the next couple of years. So, you do a little bit of back-of-the-envelope math here, and we're going to see within the next couple of years the majority of organizations using artificial intelligence in some way. It doesn't mean that AI is going to be end-all, be-all, linked and inherent in every single enterprise system. It means that it is going to have an impact, and we are going to be using it. So using AI for? So if we took a slice of data and we filtered it by companies that are currently using artificial intelligence, we see here that there are a few core areas that AI is coming to use today. Number one, and of course this is probably a no-brainer, it's a gimme, but it's analytics and reporting. One form of artificial intelligence, which again machine learning is part of the AI sort of ecosystem here, is the idea that you can use cognitive intelligence, you can use predictive analytics. You can essentially boost what you're doing today from a big data perspective even bigger, even better. And so we see here that the top use for AI today is within that realm of analytics and reporting. And I think what's so interesting about that, and again, I said it was a no-brainer and it's a gimme, but really, I mean, that's, I think at the end of the day, where a lot of organizations are getting value today out of AI. Really, the idea that we can predict for the future. I mean, one thing that I've been talking about for a really long time, at least the past couple of years, I mean, when it comes to artificial intelligence, is the idea, again, we talk about agility a lot, we talk about being dynamic. And if you have the ability to respond in real time to a problem or an issue, the best way to do that is to have the most educated business decision possible. And so a lot of machine learning-led algorithms and machine learning-led analytics in today's technology platforms, what they have the ability to do is allow organizations to leverage predictive analytics, scenario building. All right, based on our current track record, we have, say 3.5% of our staff is going to retire over the next 2 years. Let's say we have a normal attrition rate or turnover rate of 5.5%. Let's say we're going to grow by 30% over the next year, and we're opening up 3 new locations in Asia-Pac. Taking all of those items into consideration, we could predict what we are going to need from a workforce perspective. And that's what's astounding about artificial intelligence, is that it can help us do that. And talent engagement and talent acquisition. Here's what's really fantastic. I was speaking at a conference over the summer specifically on artificial intelligence, and someone in the audience asked, do you have a real live use case? And the rest of the panelists all kind of looked at each other like, this isn't one of those areas where you could just, you can get up on your soapbox and say, hey, I know 55 companies that are doing it. AI hasn't reached that level yet where we have a ton of use cases. But I do know of one, and it's I won't name names, but a video game company here in the United States that uses artificial intelligence to comb the internet, search chat rooms, search different types of video game forums. They're scouring social media, and they're helping to identify potential candidates. That is incredible to think that I can set up a few different parameters and just let it go. And again, it's not like they were able to hire 40 or 50 people out of this. I mean, essentially they were doing this as a beta run. But the idea that we can use AI today for talent engagement and talent acquisition proves that when we're talking about the totality of our talent, that AI fits in wonderfully. So the current outlets of artificial intelligence. So you may think, all right, what is AI? Again, a lot of organizations, and there's nothing wrong with really not knowing what it is. It's funny. I was talking to my own mother the other day. So my mom's in her early 60s, and she's a big fan of Amazon's Echo device. And I had joked. I said, "Oh, you bring artificial intelligence into your home?" She goes, "That's not artificial intelligence." Well, it is. That's an artificial assistant. Chatbots, artificial assistants, really are the most prevalent and essentially the most popular form of artificial intelligence today. And I think that what's really incredible about AI and sort of having that nice, simple bridge to a more innovative type of technology, something that could be considered, quote unquote, next generation, is that we've had a lot of access to this in our consumer lives. We have the ability, I mean, I've got my iPhone next to me. I can ask Siri to map out my drive home from the office today. Tell me where traffic's going to be. I could, again, and this is something my wife does every couple of weeks. When she runs out of fancy pumpkin spice K-Cups at home, she can order right on our Amazon Echo Show device that is conveniently set up next to our K-Cup machine. And she can just say, hey, Alexa, can you order me more K-Cups? And boom, it's done. The idea that consumer-led technology, that aspect can be brought into business is fantastic. Having my technology, say I'm on my way to a budget meeting, and I want to know, hey, what assignments are ending? Which of my projects are hitting milestones today or this week? Do I have any red flags? Or do I have, any problems with open requisitions? A current, RFP, any issues with that? Things like that. Machine learning, I just talked about machine learning, the idea of boosting your analytics using unique algorithms. And I talked a little bit, actually, I probably gave a lot of the slide away already, but cognitive computing and predictive scenario building, being able to look ahead to the future, to be able to have the ability to feed knowledge, to feed today's data to get a look into tomorrow. Aspects like that are amazing when it comes to what artificial intelligence can do for the modern business. And so essentially, at the end of the day, we think we can safely say here that artificial intelligence really is a future of work game changer. We talked about what it does for analytics, intelligence, talent engagement, talent acquisition, but it can help with infrastructure management. It can help link systems. Obviously, it's going to help with things like automation for recruitment and staffing, converging software together, linking all of our enterprise systems, and most importantly of all, again, you can't always 100% accurately predict the future, but you can take a good stab at it. And that's what's great about artificial intelligence and what it can do here, specifically for the world of work and the world of talent. So with that said, I've got one more slide here, and this is an infographic that was published in my Future of Work Compendium research study that published about 6.5 months ago. And really what it is a lot of people have always asked me, Chris, like, all right, boom, you're in an elevator, you got 20 seconds, tell me about the future of work. And the way that I sort of displayed here is the idea that, the modern business has certain goals. Be agile, optimize how work is done, engage top talent, and become a digital enterprise. And so there are various process, talent, and technology drivers that are helping them do that. They're helping them reach this future of work goal, this bridgeway, this path to the future of work. And so just as we have some very interesting shifts in thinking and the executive mindset, you have sort of that nice mirrored approach when it comes to technology. What is the first technology driver in the future of work? It's artificial intelligence. Didn't want to spend a lot of time here, but obviously you're going to receive a copy of the presentation, and I thought it would be maybe very valuable for you to have this and see where AI and some of the other aspects like agility and work optimization that we've been talking about so much today really fits in to this changing world of work. So, big part of the presentation and the webinar here today, I am incredibly excited to introduce Mr. Jim Burke, CEO of our webinar host and sponsor, ZeroChaos. Prior to joining ZeroChaos, Jim led 3 other technology-enabled services businesses: Advanced Discovery, a global e-discovery and risk management firm; VRAD, the world's largest telemedicine company; and Global Compliance, a leading ethics and compliance services firm; and now, of course, CEO of global provider here, ZeroChaos. Jim, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate the time.
Hey, Chris. Happy to be here.
Great. So, Jim, we're going to kick things off here with our roundtable discussion. And our first question is artificial intelligence for real? And follow-up there, how long until it is a widely adopted and leveraged form of enterprise technology?
First of all, it's definitely real. There's all kinds of examples for how it's real. You mentioned several of them already. The two come to mind for me, based on our current business and based on some of my past experiences. But we have large global automotive clients at Advanced Discovery, and they are currently building autonomous vehicles on assembly lines that use robots. So, you basically got, robots making cars that will be driven by AI. So it's definitely real. When I was running the telemedicine company, and this is years ago, we moved medical images between hospitals and the doctors that would ultimately make a diagnosis from the images. And we created artificial intelligence and bolted it on, if you will, to the front end of our workflow, and would diagnose images in 0.4 of a second. And based on the probability of the diagnosis as determined by the algorithm, we could change the protocol and more quickly route it to the right doctor based on the probability of the patient's diagnosis. So it's definitely real. It's just been more real in other industries than it has been in workforce management, but it will be prevalent in workforce management soon, as in over the next couple of years.
Great insight, Jim. And I'll just add too, obviously it is for real. You see here, Jim just talked about some fantastic outlets of AI and their impact. We talked about them throughout the course of the presentation today. I really do think that at the end of the day, when we look at this concept of the quote-unquote future of work, and I know a lot of us are getting sick of hearing that, AI is probably one of the biggest gateways to one of the biggest things about AI today, like I said, is that it's so prevalent in the consumer world. And I think that that's a perfect gateway to getting AI adopted and getting AI expansively used within the average enterprise. We don't use ERP, in our personal lives. We're not using VMS. We're not leveraging an MSP in our everyday lives, but we're using AI in some sense. And so really the continued consumerization of business, I think, is going to help take artificial intelligence, and not necessarily from myth to reality, but take it from something that just seems a little confusing on the surface to something that's widely adopted. And you saw the numbers here, too. I think last year the figure was maybe 12 or 13% of companies at that point were currently using AI, and that was all-inclusive, companies that were using anything from light to heavy utilization. But you see that number has increased, by close to 50 or 60%, and then, we're going to see that probably double over the next couple of years. So the answer to that question, how long until it's widely adopted, we're going to continue to see that over the next couple of years. I'm sure Jim would agree with me there.
I totally agree with you.
Great, and we'll kick it right back to you, Jim. We talked a lot today about total workforce management, total talent acquisition. That was a big piece of the presentation. Question for us here, how does AI fit into total workforce management or total talent acquisition strategy?
Yeah, so two ways, in my opinion, and one of them is currently being utilized and the other soon to be. And so the first is just improving tasks. And so we currently use AI to improve tasks that we perform for our clients. An easy example is using AI to match the right candidate to the right role with a higher probability of a successful outcome. And so we do that today. Where I think AI can be most valuable and is not being used yet, at least not broadly, is in workforce planning and optimization. And so, one of the recurring themes from your talk track earlier, Chris, was that, the way work gets done is changing. So technology is changing the way that work gets done. The preferences of the workers themselves are changing the way that work gets done. And all that means is that the workforce is changing. And there's two ways to deal with any type of change. The first way is reactively. Something's happened and we need to deal with it. The better way is proactively, anticipating what's going to happen and getting out in front of it. And that's critically important, and what you call a war for talent. If you want to attract and retain the best possible workers, that starts with a clear understanding of what work you need to get done. And so AI is currently being used to improve tasks, but the ultimate value or the biggest value we're going to get from AI is using it to understand what tasks are going to need to be done in the future, and then planning the workforce that's required to support that.
Yeah, and honestly, Jim, I couldn't have said it any better than that. I mean, at the end of the day, what's the goal of total workforce management? It's being able, in a more on-demand, real-time way, answering that question, how does work get done? But when you break it apart, as Jim said, what are the prerequisites? What are the skill sets needed? What's the expertise that we need? What are all the other details? Artificial intelligence essentially fits perfectly into this type of program. I mean, for the first time I wrote something about total workforce management was maybe 6.5 years ago. And, I'm not saying I got death threats from HR and procurement professionals in the space, but the reception wasn't very well. And I still think today that it's still one of those hot button, hot takes of, total workforce management isn't real. You can't do it. But honestly, I think with artificial intelligence, it becomes more possible. And I think we're getting closer to the reality of, having more than just a handful of companies out there actually putting together a total talent acquisition strategy, building a total workforce management program. So great insights there, Jim. Appreciate that. So moving on to our next roundtable question here. What is the greatest risk? And then secondly, what is the greatest benefit of using AI in workforce and talent management?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the benefit. I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So, you earlier, Chris, mentioned the benefits of total workforce management and changing from a historical view of cost to cost as well as quality. And I would actually add a few other important success criteria for managing really the contingent component within your total workforce, but I think it applies broadly to the total workforce as well. And I view it as multiple legs of a stool. So just picture a stool that required more than 4 legs, and so that's cost, that's talent quality, that's time to fill, compliance, and diversity. Those are sort of the underpinnings of any successful contingent workforce management program, and I think broadly speaking, the success criteria by which a total workforce could also be managed. And so AI can directly influence all of those things. Time to fill and identifying the right candidates for the right roles, and then some of those strategic planning opportunities that I just referenced, are all enabled by AI. And so what that does is, it helps, HR leaders and it helps procurement leaders achieve their goals. It's a tool to helping them achieve the outcomes that are important to them. And so those are, enormous benefits. The risk is, at least the one that is top of mind for me and gets the most conversation, broadly in the marketplace, is what you'd call algorithmic bias. And so AI is only as good as the people that create it, the people that create the algorithms. And so, a big component of artificial intelligence is pattern recognition. And so, the algorithm needs to be looking for the right patterns. You need to define success correctly. And if you don't, then the algorithm could actually lead you in a direction away from your goals. So it's really, really important that the algorithm be developed, be audited, and be continuously trained over time with an eye towards whether or not there's any bias that may have been built into it.
Great. Thanks, Jim. So before we move on to the next roundtable question, I don't want to take the glass half full, half empty approach and be the opposite of Jim. But I do want to expand a little bit on sort of the greatest risk. One of the things that I've been talking about for a long time when it comes to artificial intelligence is that, the output is only as good as of course, as the data and the information that's put into it. So the idea here is it's almost similar to years ago when a lot of organizations were trying to understand, a big data-led strategy. What is that? You're typically sitting on a gold mine of data, no matter what type of organization you are. I mean, if you have the typical enterprise systems in place, even if you're a more technology-heavy company, you're using VMS, you're using human capital technology, ERP, AP, general ledger, digital staffing, all of the great systems that are out there today. It's a matter of figuring out how to get that data out and how to get it analyzed and obviously getting a positive reaction or an active output from that. And I always see the greatest risk with artificial intelligence is that organizations don't totally understand how to leverage it and thinking that, hey, it's going to be easy. We turn something on and, a couple days later we have everything we could ever possibly dream and imagine. But it's not like that. So I think one point of guidance here is to really pick things that are achievable at first, to figure out a way, hey, we want to be able to, maybe do real-time resource management, or maybe we want AI, specifically for talent acquisition first before it starts getting applied, in all these other regions or, arenas of the enterprise. So, it's not an overnight grandiose strategy. It does take time. So I think that's certainly a risk, but, we spent almost an hour here today talking about all the benefits. So I would say that, the time put in is absolutely well worth it. So, final roundtable question here today, and I think we addressed this a little bit here with my very silly Skynet and Terminator analogy. But Jim, will artificial intelligence replace the human elements of talent and workforce management?
No, I think it's just the opposite. I think artificial intelligence will be, the single greatest enablement of improving the human element of total workforce management, and for two reasons. Number one is, it will free up HR leaders from task management, that can be, better done by machines, and allow, the HR leaders and the procurement leaders, to be more focused on their stakeholders and on their workforces. So AI, takes away the non-human element, and what's left for the for those who leverage AI is the human element. So it should lead to just the opposite outcome. The other way, is at the strategic level. If AI will allow, when AI allows procurement leaders and HR leaders to move from being reactive to a need to proactive, that's just called more time to plan. So the more time you have to plan, the more planful you can be. And the more planful you can be, the more human element you can incorporate into your planning. So I think that AI is a tremendous tool to enable HR leaders, procurement leaders, to better serve their stakeholders and really be perceived as adding strategic value to the organization, as opposed to simply the administrative side of onboarding and maintaining a workforce.
Great. Completely agree there with Jim. I mean, I think one of the biggest issues today with AI, especially when it comes to the business world, is this idea of the fear factor. AI is going to replace jobs. Robotics are going to make humans obsolete. But I think the thing to think about here is, for years and years and years, we've had so many different levels of automation come into the organization. And sometimes they do replace humans in some way, but that's not the goal of AI. AI can certainly automate certain routine tasks. It can certainly help specific pieces of the organization. But at the end of the day, a good positive way of looking at it is that AI should be used to find new opportunities. is that you can get a lot more strategic value out of your workforce, out of your team, if AI is an augmentative force in what they do and how they're addressing how work is done. If you notice, the future of work, this concept here, I'm not going to flip back on my slides, but everyone in attendance obviously is going to receive a copy of the presentation here today. But in the future of work model that I designed, only pieces of that are technology focused. There are other aspects to it as well, like diversity, inclusion, soft skills. Those are all big human elements, talent elements of the future of work. And what AI is going to allow us to do is to tap into those even more for the greater strategic good of the modern business. So with that said, we've run out of time here. If you have any questions, we'll make sure to follow up via email. I'll leave my contact info up. Feel free to follow me on Twitter. Feel free to shoot a note to me and all if you want to talk more about any of the content presented here today. Want to thank ZeroChaos for putting on and sponsoring such a fantastic webcast today. Jim, it's been a pleasure chatting with you and having you as a big part of this webcast. Thanks again for joining.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, Chris, and best of luck with that cold. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a great day.